The Datavana podcast, hosted by Lon Wax, features visionaries, leaders, and really smart people who join our hosts to converse about marketing, sales, operations, and everything that data ties together. We focus on practical examples, stories, and horror stories, centering around what data nirvana looks like and what the path is to achieve it.
Welcome, everybody, again to the Datavana podcast. And as we said in our intro, this is a place where we make magic from data, and we say to people how to actually become magical when you don't have the great data in front of you. Today we have an incredible person that I had the fortune to work with many moons and years ago, with different colors of shades of red that we used to work in a big company called Avaya. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Alan. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So Nick, in this show, we don't spend 20 minutes going just about your role and what you do and all the stuff that people can Google and we can do in the intro. We actually try to have a bit of fun. I know marketers don't always think of ourselves as BtoB marketers as fun, but we can, right? We can be fun. So what would you be, Nick, if you would not this amazing CMO and marketing leader? What would be this career or thing that you would do?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I have two potential routes here. One would be a tech reviewer of some sort. I'm a gadget guy. I'm the one that kind of is on the bleeding edge, trying to buy the latest thing before any performance is proven. So I'm that guy. So I just
really adopter.
I love technology. And in a very masochistic way these days, I'm a follower of politics. So if I wasn't in marketing, I'd be in some sort of a role involved in politics, or at least reporting on it or crying over it or something, but something like that.
I love it. I think the two of them have this pretty much zero in Venn diagrams overlap. Those two roles, they
That's
might be
like
very different.
Two different branches, absolutely right.
Yeah, it's like the road less taken, right? Okay, but talking about gadgets and all that, we had a conversation about microphones. I think we can do like a mini episode about how to get set up for podcast in your home office and make it really quality. There's so many things around it: the microphone, the speakers, the way the setting is, making sure you close the window, making sure the kids are in a different room today, being remote, right?
Yeah,
it's much harder than an office.
It is. We are at a point in our lives where the kids are grown, so thankfully we don't have kind of kids bursting in the door. But you have the usual lawnmower guy who decides to mow the lawn at pretty much the same time as my staff meeting or when I'm presenting or something like that. It's the usual thing. But I will tell you that this whole thing introduced a level of humanity in business that I actually like. I think people are used to now seeing people's backgrounds and kids in the background and dogs barking, and there's something, I think, warm about that because it kind of demystifies business a little bit. It kind of lets us deal with each other as people.
I love it. I think the humanification of course, we never wanted this the way to do it, but the cause is obviously not a good one, the pandemic, but the effect is interesting. It's working from home. First of all, nobody's wearing a jacket anymore. Well, we never did that in tech for a long time anyway, and nobody asked what pants we're wearing as well, because that's not on video. So we leave that one off this podcast. That's a different one after a few drinks. But it really has really lowered the level of formality, of background, of people around, of casualness. And it's just like, let's cut to the chase and connect as people. I think that's very important.
I think you're right. I mean, people kind of wear a mask, I think, at work a little bit. There's a work persona and a home persona. And I think those two are starting to get closer together, which means you're dealing more with the person that they really are. Maybe not exactly the same, but those two are kind of starting to converge. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's important for us to understand who we are as people. And when we talk about people, obviously, we talk about what we do in our roles. Why don't we jump a little bit into, we have a lot of fun on this podcast, making fun of things in the world around us. So we start off strong. Let's say, give me one thing that if you had the power, I'll give you this magic wand or fairy dust or whatever you want to call it, or chainsaw if you want to go that way, and say, I would like to take this thing out of the whole world of go-to-market or of the world of marketing that is, people are fixated by it or people are focused on it, and it's really not that helpful. What would it be, this thing that you would change or completely eradicate from the world?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me tell you, I think one of the most important areas in business is the handoff between marketing and sales, right? Because that's what business happens is you look for and find prospects and you hand them off to sales. I think that stitch is probably the most important stitch in business. And I will tell you, there is an acronym in there, smack in the middle of that stitch, that just gives me nightmares, and I'd rather just lose it altogether. And that is the acronym called SAL, Sales Accepted Leads, right? And why does that give me nightmares? Because if we have the right SLA between the marketing and sales, and we both do our jobs right, and we have a level of confidence in what marketing does, an MQL should suffice. I shouldn't have to have a gate that says sales accepts the MQL. That to me is kind of silly, because if we do the right thing and an MQL means band criteria, then it should be accepted with dancing and celebration. Champagne. And at that point, then it becomes a sales qualified lead. That's a different stage, because sure, then they engage at least, and they figure out if they're ready to be sold to. But sales accepted lead basically is kind of demeaning, I think, in a way, to professional marketers.
I love it. Okay, so let's dive on that a bit, because we like to go deep into these things that are in the, in this really band between the sales and marketing world, especially when you go outbound, but now it's mainly inbound. But let's split that now for now. So SAL can be, sometimes companies call it sales accept, sometimes sales assigned. Sales assigned pretty much should be equal to marketing qualified, whether it's account, opportunity. We'll talk about maybe that later. If something has been deemed by marketing and sales leaders and ops as this is ready enough, sales ready, let's just call it, then automatically should be accepted by sales, right? Why would you have a step saying, oh, we've defined that it's ready, we should work it, but I don't smell it. I don't like it.
Right.
Is that too much power to the AE? Is that just another level of distrust? What's the root cause of this, do you think?
Actually, I think you hit it. It ferments distrust. It basically suggests to the salesperson that what you may be getting is not what it seems. It's not what marketing may be telling you. So I want you to apply a level of judgment to it. I'm going to accept it or not accept it. That shouldn't be the case. The trust should be there that if we've done our work right and it's a band qualified lead, you should accept it. Again, whether it's assigned to you and all of that in one fell swoop, that's the idea. And I think that's what you're saying is once it's MQL, you can call it whatever you want when it lands in Salesforce for Marketo or whatever, but it's automatic. There isn't a judgment there for the salesperson to say, yeah, I kind of accept it. But I don't like that at all, because it does exactly what you said. It actually suggests that it may not be what it seems.
Exactly. So everything starts with trust between leaders and hopefully a revenue operations team, which we'll talk about maybe in a few minutes, to make sure that we assimilate all of this across the organizations. So if you decide that marketing is the A cover at the top, whether it's outbound and inbound, doesn't matter. And when something is sales ready, I don't care what terminology you use. Then once it's reached that, it should be owned by sales. Sales continues. Of course, marketing never stops. A cover, validation, bottom of the funnel, buyer's guide, analyst reports, sure, we can talk about that all day long. But once sales is taking the ownership from a marketing nurture or marketing A cover, there is no second step saying, I'm not sure if I'm taking ownership. If you agree on the terms and conditions, right, and on the rules of engagement, ROE, why do we need this, correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. Not only does it, again, suggest a level of mistrust between the two, or it actually promotes mistrust, but it also introduces a level of delay that's unnecessary, because if I, as a salesperson, have to then tell you if I accept it, I have to put some sort of thought process or logic into it. I may have to do some research and all that. And we know salespeople love them to death, but they're coin operated, right? They're going to spend their time in things that directly affect their wallet.
What's going to work?
Going there and trying to figure out whether or not what marketing gave me is a real thing kind of looks to me like a secondary, tertiary thing. And then basically what you've done is you've introduced a couple of more days worth of a lead sitting there waiting to be quote unquote accepted, which is silly.
Yeah, I love the way you're saying it. I think it's a cool topic. It's also, so here's a question on that. So if you have a BDR team should they receive the marketing qualified level, whatever it's called, lead, account, sales ready? So is that when you say sales accepted? Is that to a BDR or is it to an AE? And if it's to an AE, is there room for the BDR to do a smell test and set a meeting, and then only should it be sales accepted? Do you think that's the fix?
Yeah. I think whether you call them a BDR or an AE or whatever you call them, it's the same thing. At the end of the day, they're a sales individual. They're quoted, they're compensated as a sales individual. So I think the dynamic is absolutely the same. Sure, your BDR is going to be a lower cost resource, and they potentially should be the ones sales qualifying the leads at the beginning. But it's the same dynamic. I don't want them accepting the leads. That should be automatic. They should already land on their desk based on some sort of geographic assignment or industry assignment or whatever your assignment mechanism is. But it lands and it's automatically accepted. They don't have to accept it. The system accepts it for them. Do they qualify it at the BDR level first, sales qualification, versus giving it to a more expensive field-based resource? That's actually a pretty good idea, but it depends on your construct. It depends on the time frame that you can wait, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's all about, correct. It's about the data and the reporting and the conversion rates. The terminology of MQOs, marketing qualified ops, which is usually stage one, is similar to what SALs used to be in the right old days, which is sales accepted after I've set a meeting. It really, if you take the terminology out, is if you guys as sales marketing ops have decided that this means it's sales ready, there should never be another step by the sales AE rep or BDR saying, I'm not sure if it's ready. I have the power. That's the bottom line, right?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you another positive side effect of that. If you do that and you again assume a level of trust, then it kind of keeps both parties focused and honest, right? Because the right marketing people will be like, hey, we can't screw around with these things because there isn't going to be another stage of validation. If we call something MQL, it better be an MQL because then you break the trust. If you break the trust, you have huge problems. So the marketing people are a little bit more cautious to only give real MQLs, which means they do the ML to MQL conversion in a lot more deliberate, focused fashion, which is where it should happen. You shouldn't send 50, 60% of the ML should not be going to sales because most of them are not real MLs.
You want to tell me that a random lead that comes in and fills out one form on a random webinar from 3 years ago is not immediately an MQL that a salesperson has to jump on? That's crazy.
I would love it to be 100% conversion, but I wear it as a badge of honor. The more I disqualify myself in marketing, the better.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's all about the data eventually, right? And that's why we talk about this show a lot about if the data and the reporting that you all agree upon tells you that the conversion rate should be, I love it when people ask me, for example, on baseline, you should have 50% of marketing qualified become second stage. Well, it all depends on what qualification means for you. Yeah. If your marketing qualified is very, very conservative and you're qualifying at a high standard, like you said, then of course the conversion rate is higher. And then you need just 3x coverage, right? Not even. That's probably right. 3x. Otherwise, if you're more of an easy flow, it's much more open, then your conversion rate is going to be lower and you're going to need 5, 6, 7x coverage for salespeople, right? It's all about the numbers, right?
Absolutely. And I think, you hit on something slightly related but slightly different, which is having data. Why is that important when you do qualification, right? Because as we know from elections, right, people don't really tell you what's on their mind. They don't tell you everything that's on their mind. You're going to have to kind of combine what their behavior tells you and what they tell you, right? So data is very important as the qualification agency or whoever is qualifying it for you, for them to be able to know the digital exhaust that these people are putting out, either on your website or outside your website, what their role is, their function, all of those things that they're not going to tell you in the contact us form, what they say on LinkedIn. All of that stuff is important because you understand whether or not they really are in the buying committee, or there's somebody just doing research, or there's somebody looking for a new employer and they're checking out the employer. So they want to look like all studious and they're studying the company left and right. There's so many different things that data can tell you that the person on the phone will not.
So let's dive into that. Data is, of course, something we care about. So why don't you tell me a little bit, why is data so important to you in your current role and in general? And how do you view something that is probably not there yet, because none of us have reached it, the Nirvana, the ideal state of data? What does that mean to you? What could you wish it to be?
Yeah. Well, let's start with a no-brainer, right? Which says that data is knowledge and knowledge is power, right? Mm-hmm. And we are in a position as marketers in this modern world that we have information and therefore power that sales does not have. Now, they don't have it not because they're not smart enough to have it. They have it because that's not their job. Their job is to go sell, not to collect data, right? But we're sitting on a treasure trove of data that, if applied correctly, can be hugely, hugely valuable. Now, that's the key thing right there, is if applied correctly. And what does that mean, if applied correctly? The machine hasn't been invented yet that will do marketing for you. Thinking and humans are still required. Okay. Now they have an easier job understanding the prospect and the customer they're dealing with because of all that data, but you still got to think that you still have to kind of figure out, hey, what does this individual really, really want? What do we think is the best marketing content to put in front of them, and all of those things? And how do I communicate this to sales, which has, usually the attention span of a 3-year-old, in terms of what is the data that I want to give them that is optimal for them to act on. Not everything that we look at as marketers. As marketers, we look at data left, right, and center. But what is the 5% of the knowledge that I want to put in front of the salesperson while I'm giving them that lead, so they have both context and contact?
Yeah, definitely. You want to direct every seller to be focused, effective, and not, especially, I think even more important than that, not to spend their time on the wrong things, because that's very, very harmful for everything, for them, morale, and even quote attainment. So tell me a little bit, let's dive into like the data ownership and manipulation. In the company, who owns data for you? Is there a centralized team? Does each function, like marketing, sales, ops, customer success, business ops? How does it work? And how do you actually look at the data as an agreed upon terms? Who is responsible for that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, but I don't think I've come across any company in my entire career where there's a simple answer to who owns data, because data is everywhere, right? If we're talking about who owns prospect, customer behavior data, digital behavior data, then obviously we do. And there's nobody that has access to the kind of information that we have. But as you well know, the organization is full of data, from financial to accounting to actual product delivery, management, maintenance, all of those things, all of those data fragments, which is actually, we talk about data Nirvana, right? When those fragments come together in one, 360-degree view of the customer, that's what Nirvana looks like. Yeah. Theoretically, we should be there. No, I haven't come across a company, and I've worked with very large and relatively small companies that has a full picture, with a high fidelity picture that you need to have for customers, using all those data fragments. We're like the human brain. We use like 10% of the potential power of data in any company.
I like it. Yeah. If we had 60%, holy crap, we'll be like 12 items.
That would be incredible. And you figure, how hard could it be? It's all like ones and zeros somewhere in the organization, right? And we have data lakes and data rivers and whatever the hell.
CDPs, CRMs.
Yeah, so we got all the technology pieces. You figure, why do we not have a single high fidelity 360 view of the customer? The answer is people get in the way. People, processes, organizational charters, like territorial approaches to business. Politics, IT having 1,000 other things to worry about, like, giving VPN access to people remote now and everything else. All of those things get in the way. Technically speaking, we should be there.
So let's talk about that a second. That's actually, especially as companies that have some years of experience versus younger companies. Would you think that it's a directive should be very early on from the CEO, because it can't be or COO, but it can't be like every CMO to lead it because it's going to be hard. To say, we need a single view of data, CEO dashboard and below with secondary metrics. And we will assign a business ops team or whatever overlay or whatever creative name you want to say it. And this should be one of our top 3 rocks for the year.
Absolutely. And, we use CDO as Chief Digital Officer, but there's a CDO that says Chief Data Officer, right? Which at the end of the day, I think it's a function or a position that's missing in many companies, and it's absolutely needed. Now, how many companies have an opportunity to start from scratch, right? Very, very hard. Very hard to do. Very few companies. And so your guidance is absolutely right for new companies that are basically starting out, and they have the foresight to say, look, we know it's going to be necessary, so let's put this in the beginning. So that's beautiful because you can articulate exactly how the data flows. Somebody owns the data, and that's the end of that. The reality is that you have years and years of legacy and multiple systems. And for this to happen, it's more difficult. However, the first step and the most important step is making somebody responsible. At the end of the day, there's a chief on the top of the pyramid called the CEO that can say to everybody an edict that says, look, I don't care what organization you sit in, you're going to appoint somebody in your team, owns your data, and you're going to be part of this organization, a virtual extension of this organization. And your role in life is to avert all this data into the single lake. From there, the CDO, the Chief Data Officer, will then figure out how do we optimize this, how do we make the most of this. But I can't think of any data, to be honest, Alan, that doesn't matter in some way, even if it's a small way. Storage is so cheap now that I have a lot more to gain to gather all the data in one place and worry about what to do with it later, versus try to go in the beginning and say, well, this one I care about and this one I don't care about. Why don't you care about it? Even if it's like, entries and exits from your building, at some point in time, there may be some connection to customer visits and employee engagement. Why not gather it, right?
Yeah, gathering unstructured data is extremely simple today. Making structured, orchestrated data that drives business decisions is what I think you alluded to is always a priority, but I challenge us all because I believe it's never a big enough priority, because they're like, oh no, we need to change the CRM system. That's a priority. IT can't do it for the next year. But if you change your CRM system and you don't have a data structure in place that is going to help you to make bigger decision, you're just implementing another tool. Everybody's implementing intent tools, ABM tools.
Yeah.
Well, where's the data orchestration to support it, right?
Yeah, if you're expecting to get anything done by committee, you'd be waiting a long time. The only way you're going to get it done is if you make it somebody's job, and you tie up their compensation to you, high-level executive, either reporting to the CIO or reporting directly to the CEO. Their job in life is to make sure that all the data gets gathered, is cleaned up, and most importantly, that we drive business decisions from that data. Eventually you'll succeed. If you hire the right person, they will make it happen, especially if the compensation of the job relies on it.
And if you empower them, of course, with not just dollars, but with telling people that, okay, I know it's not a priority for you now, Mr. CMO needs to get 20,000 leads. And I know it's not important for you now, Mr. CRO, that is very important about coverage for the current quarter and closing it. But if you want to look ahead for 2 quarters from now, you better prioritize it, right?
Yeah. Alana, I will tell you this. I think anyone who is an idiot enough to get in front of the CEO and say, hey, I don't think data is important, that is the master career limiting move of the century.
I love it. Quote, unquote. Let's put that on. Like if you're being an idiot is telling your CEO data is not important enough for me to prioritize it.
You don't deserve to be anywhere near business, let alone the executive suite. If you ever make a statement like that.
Yeah, well, we need a CEO to drive it first, right? That's what's important. That's one of the things we talk about. Data is being so important, but we said that data can get in the way because it's so difficult. So we have on this podcast this thing called the data horror story. All of us have many scars from times that we tried to, put data in place, looked at it wrongly, made assumptions that were incorrect, or just funny stories that we course corrected. I'm sure you have some of those. Like to share one?
Yeah, sure. I will say that data doesn't horrify me at all. People horrify me. So it's actually people misunderstanding or misusing data. That's the problem.
Cool.
Data by itself doesn't bite. It doesn't have teeth. It doesn't have any worries at all.
It's nice. It's soft. It's comfy.
Data is so good. It's ones and zeros at the end. It's not a problem. But I'll tell you, when I joined a large systems integrator a few years ago, we're talking significant size company, like 150,000 people and $25 billion firm at some level. So my job, so I came in as a head of digital marketing and branding. But on the digital marketing side, job number one was to put a digital infrastructure for marketing, right? And what do you do first, right? You try to figure out what's what and who's first and what do we have out there for a company this size, right? So we first thing is, okay, we need one marketing database. So we did a little scan to figure out how many marketing databases were out there. There was 32 individual, independent, not connected marketing databases, marketing with a quotation mark, right?
Wow.
Anything from literally, I kid you not, ACT databases to Excel to Eloqua at the time and a Primo and this and that and the other. Everybody had their own licenses. They were all kind of, mini chiefs of data. And the challenge was not a technical challenge. Thank God about 25, 30 years ago, somebody figured out how to normalize, tables. So it wasn't that, it wasn't that hard. It was getting people to let go of their data. They actually thought that this is their data. I remember having discussions going, why should I give you my data? I'm like, what made you the owner of the data? You work for the company. It's the company's data. So you will let go of the data or we will let go of you. So you have to kind of play the hardball in the beginning to get people to realize, A, it's not their data, and B, having data islands makes no sense for anybody, right? So it took me literally 6 months to convince all their IP, because they didn't report to me, to threaten, convince, and cajole, people. It took about 6 months, and it probably took like 6 days to bring the databases together.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's like 6 months to do a 6-day project.
Yeah.
Phase 1, make people understand. Phase 2, make people realize. Phase 3, buy them a mirror to look into. Phase 4, get them to commit. Phase 5, get them to really commit.
Yeah.
Phase 6, give them 3 months to think about it. Phase 7, okay, 6 days, we'll do it.
Yeah. And
that is a horror story for the books. I love it.
Phase 8, get them out of marketing because they don't belong there.
Yeah, it's an internal marketing role more than external for that one. Wow. Good for you. I love it. We've both been through M&As. I think it's interesting. We don't always have people from big companies like I've been and you've been, of course. M&A as a source of data issues and challenges is obviously top of mind. How do you orchestrate between systems? Because you don't integrate a company in a day. You maybe start to integrate people, but not the data. Any thoughts about and recommendations about how to look at that if you integrate companies?
Yeah, no, and I've been through a number of them, to be honest. And the challenge is always the same, but I think there's an opportunity that's even bigger than the challenge. The opportunity is you're actually talking about data integration. Mm-hmm. So if anything, this becomes a dialogue that
on the table.
On the table that many times it's not even on the table, right? So that's a good thing. People know right away that you have no option. You're going to have to integrate data. And of course, there is usually like a clean room before the deal happens. And then after the deal happens, there's kind of an integration team from both companies. So that's the opportunity is it's on the table. The challenge is you're dealing with 2 IT organizations, not one. So, 2 data privacy sets of groups and 2 sets of lawyers and, all of that stuff. But I think that, again, the benefit outweighs the challenge. The benefit is that it's on the table and people are actually working towards it. When people have their mindset to actually integrate data, it's not brain surgery. We've gone to the moon and a couple of other planets recently. So I think we can figure out how to integrate tables.
Definitely. I think the takeaway for listeners, and when we think about it, is there are some compelling events that enable you to accelerate the better state of your data, especially for go-to-market, but in general. And M&A is definitely one of them, because you're anyway thinking about integrating the processes, the businesses, the systems, the products. Might as well do it well and create and leverage it to do something better. And the second time is, if you're thinking about, unfortunately, but sometimes you have to, switching a CRM or one of the core ERP, core business systems, use it more than just switching the systems. Use it to really think about the data structure and what business is it serving 2 years from now, and not about what it was 2 years ago when you started thinking about this project, right?
That's right. It's always a great opportunity to clean house. That's a good thing, because, the business has changed so much that, even the best businesses at some point in time, maybe a year or 6 months or whatever, they need to be looking at it. Does this still make sense, right? Because, business challenges change, the business environment change. Look at what happened with COVID, right? If people are not really looking at every single thing about their go-to-market, including their data structures and everything else, during COVID, they're nuts, because everything's different. A year ago was much, much different than what it is now.
Definitely. The whole situation of agile decisions, if you cannot back it up by enough data, you might not have perfect data always, but if you cannot back it up with enough data that can give you either a hypothesis or a direction, or completely eliminate things that in your 12-year or 16 months plan, if you don't have a data structure in place, I actually believe that's a lack of differentiated value. Like, you're actually going to be behind your competition. It's a differentiated competitive edge to have great data in agile and uncertain times, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like we said, data of all sorts and from all angles of the company, that's how you make decisions. The whole idea is to make decisions based on data and facts, right? So the more data you have, the more high fidelity your decisions are going to be. Otherwise, you're kind of operating without dials, and your gut can take you only so far. So
my gut can take most people longer than most people because of the significant size of it, but it's to each his own, right?
Depends on the size of your gut, I guess. Yeah,
exactly. Not all guts are equal. Yeah. Nick, the last thing we do on this show is always give you not just the magic wand, but this amazing power that you could go to a CEO, a founder, small company, mid-size, or even massive companies, doesn't matter. What will be this thing that most of the CMOs, even CROs, are usually afraid or not comfortable telling the CEO or their board, that if you had the power to come and tell some of them and guide them, that to tell them one or two things, what would it be that probably their team is now struggling to tell them because they're so focused on just achieving a number?
Yeah, I would say, not unlike what we've been discussing, is that to be the optimal company that we can be, you have to lay the foundation first. And I would challenge the company to say that data is absolutely a foundational part of this. And let's take the time and the resource to do it right. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some dollars. And it's going to take some organizational discipline that may not immediately ring the cash register, but it will drive the company for years to come. So take the pain now and make it a company directive to be a fact-based, data-focused company. No matter what industry you're in, I don't really care. 80% of the decision-making process of any individual right now is happening online, right? So if you don't do it for any other reason, just to understand the buying behavior, those steps that people take before they buy whatever you're selling them, you need to have the right data infrastructure.
100%. I love it. Data and foundation is important for you. Doesn't matter what size, what stage you are, because if you're not going to do it, it's actually going to hurt you in the short and long term. Just driving leads and SAL, sales assigned leads, isn't what marketing always does. There's much more to it, right?
Right. So the thing is, focusing on the long game is a difficult thing. I get it. Look at Wall Street. Look at how we reward executives, how we reward companies. It's a very short-term kind of thinking, right? And in data, you're not going to see the revenue flow in the first 3 months or 6 months, or it may take a year before you actually start to establish the data and the infrastructure, then the cadence, and the most important thing is what you started with is, what do I do with it? How do I drive business?
Decision making.
decision making. So it's going to take some time. You're not going to see immediate benefits, but the long-term benefits, if you're a CEO with a long game in mind, if you're not looking to kind of make money on your stock conversions next 12 months and you're out, if you're looking at the long game and the long, basically, success of the company, this is where you should be spending your time.
Excellent. Nick, I love it. I think you dropped some amazing insights on us. Even without data, you had amazing insights on this podcast, but we all base it on data that we know. Thank you so much.